Please note that listeners may find some of this content in this episode upsetting or distressing. If you would like to access support relating to the topic discussed, please get in touch with our team. All of our contact details can be found at www.healthwatchessex.org.uk.
Welcome to Hidden Voices, the podcast series which explores the less heard voices in health and social care. I'm Sarah and I work for Healthwatch Essex. It's our job to make sure that people's experiences help to improve health and social care services. In this episode, we are talking to Sarah, Katie and Donna about endometriosis. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming to lovely Earl's Cane today. So this podcast is about endometriosis, and I think the first question to ask is, what is endometriosis?
Yeah, so endometriosis is where cells that are similar to those in the lining of the womb or the uterus grow in other parts of the body. And this is something that we, all three of us, sort of suffer from, and we've all had diagnosis of endometriosis.
Okay. So I actually met you three down at the Rayleigh Endometriosis Support Group, which I came to late last year, I think was the first time. Me and my colleague Jane came initially just to tell you about Healthwatch and what it is that we do. And I was so blown away by all of your stories and your experiences of trying to get a diagnosis, trying to find treatment, that I just felt that your voices really needed to be heard on a much bigger scale. And I came away from that group knowing that I wanted us to do a podcast and also a project alongside that as well. And the main aim of this is to get your voices heard, to hopefully help improve those diagnostic and treatment pathways. So Sarah, you said all three of you have been diagnosed with endometriosis. How long did it take you to get your diagnosis?
I've been suffering from endometriosis and adenomyosis since getting on for 40 years. I was initially diagnosed with it when I was 27, but it took me approximately 15 years to get that diagnosis. I would say that my symptoms started from the moment I started my period. It was just before my 12th birthday. And from that moment on, it was just, my background was just going backwards and forwards from the doctors with symptoms of painful, heavy periods. And I think the common thing that would often happen was you go to the doctors, they'd sort of give you something to sort of help with the pain or with the heavy bleeding, but generally would just say, well, this is your period, it's just a painful period, and then sort of pat you on the back and let you go on your merry way. So it was only until sort of later on, when I was sort of in my mid-20s, and I was looking at maybe, the idea of maybe starting a family. The way I ended up getting referred was I actually told a bit of a fib. And I'd said that I've been trying to conceive, and for the first time they actually took it seriously and said, okay, we'll have a look to see what's going on here. And they found, I got sent for an ultrasound, and fortunately for me that was quite obvious because I had a large endometrioma, which is like a blood-filled cyst on my right ovary. So that's how I got found, how it got discovered initially, and then it kind of snowballed and escalated from there. So I ended up going privately to see a consultant, and then I've had numerous surgeries over the years. So I'm kind of at the end of my journey now, because I'm approaching 50 this year, at the end of a very, very long journey. I am now looking at having a total hysterectomy, so I'm on the waiting list for that, but I'm under University College Hospital London because the endometriosis is infiltrating on my bowel. My uterus is 3 or 4 times the size of the average uterus. It's very large. So they need a multidisciplinary team of professionals to sort of do that surgery. So unfortunately, it's quite a common story, I think, is that the NHS won't touch you for that. So you have to get referred to a specialist unit, and unfortunately there aren't many of them around. So that's kind of where I am at the moment, sort of in a nutshell with my journey so far. But littered along the way, obviously, there's just been numerous medications, numerous treatments, lots of misinformation, lots of gaslighting, I want to say. Do I feel like I can say that?
Yeah, it's a word that a lot of women have used to
feel gaslighted a lot, feel like you're going slightly mad, that you're just somebody that's not got a very high pain threshold, or that you know, that you're complaining about something that everyone else manages on a day-to-day, even though you feel like, no, that isn't the case. It's just you do generally feel like you're just not being listened to. And just so many inconsistencies amongst health professionals, you know, in terms of advice and medication, and large gaps in knowledge and understanding, I think, for some professionals, whether they're, you know, GPs or even consultant gynecologists, in, you know, what's the best treatment, you know, like myths that are sort of bandied around, like, oh, if you have children, you know, that'll sort you out, you won't have that anymore, or endometriosis doesn't grow when you're pregnant, just, and the classic, which I think we've all had, is that, well, you've had a laparoscopy, we've removed it all, so it's gone now and it can't come back, which we all know is completely untrue. So, you know, we're all here to sort of demonstrate that. We're all sort of living, breathing examples that isn't the case, because, you know, I was lucky enough to have 2 children, you know, odds were stacked against, but I did, and my endometrioma got bigger, my endometriosis got worse, and it didn't go away. Yeah, and even after 3 surgeries, it still came back. So, it's not gone anywhere. So that's how I'm here.
Donna and Katie, I remember you two, when we were chatting at the support group, that you two had mentioned that you both had been able to get some tests and sort of answers, I suppose, to some questions privately, because you had option to do that through work health insurance. How has that helped both of you? Sort of, has it sped up that process? Has it given you more answers, or has it just sort of...
So mine wasn't actually through health insurance and
Okay.
through work. It was just that I felt the need to get a private opinion from a specialist in endometriosis, because I felt that I wasn't getting the answers that I needed. So for me, it's probably slightly different than for Katie, but it was that whole thing of not feeling gaslit, actually feeling that speaking to this private consultant, that I actually felt heard, that he listened to everything that I had to say and understood everything, explained everything to me in a way that was understandable to me. And actually, when I received the letter about that consultation with him, I actually cried, because it was so emotional just to read that somebody had actually heard everything that I said, and it made sense to him, and what was the best options really for me. Whereas I hadn't felt that I had got that service, unfortunately, with the professionals that I'd come across in the NHS.
How long was it before you decided to get that private?
So I got diagnosed 12 months ago with endometriosis, so 6 months into my diagnosis, and the support group started at a really convenient time, just at the time of my diagnosis really, and kind of hearing everybody's stories made me realise I needed another opinion, because actually I'd seen the gynecologist the day before who talked to me about having an endometrioma on my right ovary, who assured me that it would be fine, nothing would happen with it. And I turned up at the support group the next day and heard 4 stories of burst endometriomas, and how that can actually be a really significant health event, obviously. And so obviously I was concerned straight away that the information I'd been given by the medical professionals was not accurate based on people's lived experience. And that obviously made me think I need to get, another opinion.
Definitely. And how about you, Katie? Where did it start for you?
I mean, I think very similar stories for all of us, unfortunately, but in hindsight, I'd say it took 21 years for me to get my diagnosis. Similar to Sarah, I started my periods when I was 12, and looking back, I think that's probably when my symptoms started, and I got diagnosed when I was 33. Yes, very similar stories. That was 21 years of visits to the doctors with various symptoms and tests. But I'd never even heard of endometriosis until I was 33. And the only reason that I got diagnosed was somewhere along that journey, I got put onto the progesterone-only pill, purely because 3 out of the 4 weeks of a month, I wasn't functioning anymore due to all the symptoms I was experiencing. And that pill worked great for a number of years because it stopped my periods. And with that, quite a lot of the symptoms subsided. It now turns out that because it's all hormonal based, the endometriosis was still developing and growing while I was on the pill, and eventually what happened for me was I actually started bleeding again a few years later whilst on the pill, but just sporadically. And eventually, after checking in with the GP, they said, "Oh, come off of the pill and just take a break. You've been on it a number of years, see what happens." A couple of weeks after stopping the pill, came onto my period, and it was just, I was at work in London, and I felt I started my period, and then the pain it's so hard to describe, because I think Donna and Sarah will know, and anybody else who experiences endometriosis, it's excruciating. And as the day went on, I started to feel nauseous, and I was sweating, and then basically what happened was I made it to the end of the day, got on the train home, and then projectile vomited all over myself on the train on the way home, which was obviously mortifying, like humiliating. I was mortified. And then once I got home, I spent 3 hours just violently vomiting, and then I couldn't get out of bed for the next 24 hours. Every time I stood up, I collapsed. I was just so dizzy. And it was at that point that finally, for me, that was when I saw a very good GP who, after all those years, said, "Oh, actually, I think you might have endometriosis." And I said, "What's that?" But then, like you say, so unfortunately, from the NHS point of view, there was a lot of dots that were not joined for 21 years, and a lot of being dismissed. I was told it was in my head, which is very common. I'm now hearing from other sufferers. And it wasn't until that one point, which was an NHS GP who said, "Oh, I think you might have endometriosis," but then having private healthcare, what I would say is it just sped up the process for me. And I was very lucky for that to happen. And then that would lead me on to talking about, which I'm sure Sarah and Donna can talk to this as well, the difference between ablation and excision surgery. Because what happened for me was I got a private referral to have ablation surgery, which was done by a general gynecologist. I don't want this to sound like I'm criticising that, because obviously I'm lucky to have had that, and it's a good thing to a certain point. But basically what that means is it's general gynecologist in that field. So they have knowledge of endometriosis, but it's not specialised. And ablation means they burn the endometriosis away. But research over the years has shown that is much less effective than excision surgery, which can only be done by a specialised endometriosis surgeon. And that's where they, from my understanding, they cut the endometriosis away or laser it away. And that's shown to be much more effective in removing, I think basically you have to remove all of the cells to stop it growing back, because they're mutated cells, basically. And I was lucky enough, I got my diagnosis through the ablation surgery very quickly, privately. But as these two ladies also said, I was told, "Oh, this will solve everything." And it's an emotional roller coaster, because it didn't. And then again, I was lucky because private healthcare paid for me to see an excision specialist surgeon. And I've had that excision surgery. But unfortunately, again, although I've been lucky enough to have that, I was told, this will probably solve a lot of the symptoms, and it's had very little impact on actually how I suffer. So I don't regret the surgery, but it's not, it works for some people. I think it's very hit and miss. They just don't know enough. No, there's not enough research and money that's funded, unfortunately. And I know there's lots of areas like that, but there's no cure, as it were. Some women, they have the surgery and it really helps all their symptoms. Other women, they have the surgery and it has very little effect, and it's just luck of the draw, I think.
And you don't know until you've had it, do you? How or if that is going to work for you, and that's the roll of the dice, isn't it?
I think at best, I feel like a lot of the time it just buys you more time, and I think that's what they're trying to do with all of these sort of surgeries and these medications, like with the pill, and obviously they also recommend like the Mirena coil, the contraceptive pill, the laparoscopies and stuff. It feels like they're just almost trying to preserve your sort of fertility and your normal functioning before, resorting to anything too drastic, particularly for younger people, which you can understand. But then, you can have your laparoscopy and have the ablation surgery, and then within 6 months you're back to square one. And it could be as little as some people I've heard that have reported that from their first period after that surgery, that their symptoms were just as bad, if not worse, than they were before. But what I find a little bit unsettling is that, you know, you're still seeing, even after, you know, there's a lot of more raised awareness about endometriosis now in the media, and there's a lot more activity going on around sort of improving women's health and understanding around that. But yet you're still hearing the same stories of women going to the doctors or going to see a consultant gynaecologist, and they're still saying, you know, like, oh yeah, you've had your surgery and it's all gone now, you're cured. You know, you don't need to worry anymore, discharged, off you go. And then, you know, then what? You know, because where's the aftercare? What next? Because that's not enough. You know, that's you need to have a long-term plan, I think, to manage it, and somebody that's keeping up with what that looks like and how you're managing on that plan as well going forwards. Like there's no check-in. So once you're discharged from gynaecology, you know, there isn't, you know, you might have a 6 months or an annual checkup after that initial, if you're lucky, because I know some haven't even got that. You know, they've not even had a review after their surgery. And then you kind of fumbling your way through with your GP, you know, who, with the best will in the world, you know, if you're lucky enough to get a GP that really is clued up on women's health, then that's great. If not, sorry for you, because that's, you're just gonna get that old, you know, back to the beginning again, really, where you started. So it's kind of frustrating. But I think the diagnostic pathway as well is just, I think they don't know an awful lot about it, and I think there's been a lot of research about what possibly causes it and stuff like that, but the diagnostic pathway is so long-winded and so, you know, not particularly accurate. I mean, if you're lucky enough for it to show up on a scan, then that's great, but it doesn't always show up.
I was about to say, I've heard it doesn't always show up.
So unless you've got an endometrioma, or you've got a very skilled sonographer that's able to sort of detect what that looks like, then that can go unnoticed. So you might fall at the first hurdle, if you like. And then we were sort of saying an MRI is normally more reliable, because then you can often see more deep infiltrating endometriosis that way, or if it's migrated to other parts of the body that's being scanned, then you might see that. Otherwise, you know, it is surgery. It's like a laparoscopic, a keyhole surgery, for them to go in and basically have a good look around. And then we've also had reports at our group whereby people have had diagnostic surgery and then they've closed them up and not done anything, and then said, yes, we found endometriosis, we've now going to have to deal with that. Okay, so what are you going to, did you deal with it? That, no, we didn't, this was just a diagnostic surgery. We're going to now go back in, either go back in or we're going to manage it some other way. So we're, you know, putting women through these procedures, you know, unnecessarily, and then there's no guarantee of it being managed or being sorted out at the end of it. And like Katie said, the ablation surgery really does just buy you a little bit more time. And if I look back over all my medical records and my surgeries that I've had, every single one of those was an ablation. There was no excision surgery in it, apart from when they removed the endometrioma from my ovary, because they had to dissect that. I had to dissect my ovary to do that. But then it burst, and there was all sorts of implications that were related to that. So I think it's just, yeah, there just needs to be a lot of change, I think, to make the process a little bit better for everybody. You know, I've come from, when I joined the support group, for me it was, I'm coming from a place now where I feel like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I know that it's not guaranteed to get rid of everything, and that I could still have complications and difficulties afterwards, because even a total hysterectomy may not eradicate everything. But I want to raise awareness and support for my children and for young people that are going through the same thing, so they don't have to experience the same difficulties that I had. I mean, I'm looking at my own daughter, you know, she's 22. She had a diagnostic laparoscopy last year. They found it, they said they got rid of it, and she's cured. So again, we're seeing that pattern emerge. Just, I think for women generally, just to be able to have that awareness about their bodies and actually being confident that that's not normal, that isn't what's supposed to happen. And, you know, although there are a lot of people out there suffering from it, that isn't the norm. That you shouldn't be told that this is what it's like, because it's not. It shouldn't be like that at all.
It's sadly it's a real common story that has come up, you know, through the survey so far. Is it generally all started with someone's periods, when their period started, and that they had no idea that what they were going through wasn't normal, because no one had told them otherwise, or they weren't able to talk about it.
Well, I think when you're a teenager, maybe people are different or times are different, but it was just something that I did not discuss with anyone, because you just talk that it's embarrassing, really, to talk about. So it's the last thing you're going to really... Oh, how heavy is your period? What does the blood look like? How painful? And also, how can you measure pain? You can't. What is painful to someone else? It's just, you know.
It also depends on the people around you. So, for example, like my mum, that was her normal. But we only found out when she had a prolapse in and she ended up having a hysterectomy in her 60s. They found then that she had endometriosis. So actually her experience was the same as mine. So for her, what I was going through as a teenager was normal. So it depends on who's, like, I suppose, you've got around you.
Comparing it to.
Because they're saying, you know, your mum may well have said, oh, you know, don't worry, because I'm exactly the same, you know. And whereas now, because I've been through that as well, but I know that that's actually not normal. When my children come to me and say that this is happening to them, I look at it and go, right, we need to get that looked at, because that's not right.
I know this is, obviously, I'm going to be quite graphic, but then it's the nature of this conversation, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
But I know a lot of us, when we have our periods, they're extremely heavy, and like the colour of the blood, and also you often get like big clumps of almost like skin that's coming out. And there's an advert on telly at the moment, and it gets me every time. It's a certain sanitary towel company, and they talk about gush moments, and they say, oh, when your gush moment comes. And it really gets to me, because I think if I was a teenager and I heard that they're normalising what is a gush moment, because then when you're having that heavy period and you feel yourself, you feel that skin leaving your body and those lumps and clumps. So okay, that's a gush moment that's been normalised by this brand on television. So you're not going to go to the doctor, because everybody must suffer that. You know, it's kind of how it frustrates me, because that's not normal. Yeah, exactly. If you're if you're changing the protection that you're wearing every couple of hours, if you're leaking through your clothes, it's not normal.
And also the clots and stuff that you referred to, but that's to have them one after the other, after the other, after the other, that is not normal. Anything larger than like a 50p piece, that is not normal. That's got to be so scary as well. And that we're talking about that, you know, like you stand up, we talk about the gush with that is coming, basically essentially lumps from the lining of your wounds, clotting, and it's because of the heaviness of your bleeding. You get those clots because you're bleeding so heavily, your body isn't able to cope with the amount of blood so it's trying to clot it as well as it's coming away. But also like having decidual casts, which is basically a large clot that's almost the shape of your uterus come away. My daughter's had that, and that was terrifying. That looked terrifying. But that's a common side effect for people with endometriosis. It's something people get.
I think one thing coming to the group for me was how wide and varied symptoms can be, and I think it goes back to kind of what we said about endometriosis can grow anywhere on the body, and so depending on where it's growing in your body, it depends on the symptoms you have. So some people have more issues with their bowels, some people have issues with kind of getting urinary tract infections, and it's to do with where it grows. And I think that is possibly one of the reasons it's hard for people to be sure what is it that I've got, because it could be other things, and also maybe for doctors maybe not piecing together, because obviously, you know, some of these symptoms can happen because of other things that might be going on with your body, but everyone's symptoms of endo are definitely different. And I think before the support group, I was trying to navigate that online, looking at different forums and thinking, well, that doesn't happen to me. So have I still got it? And I think that that's why it's really helpful to talk in person with other people and kind of hear what their lived experience is. And that was certainly one of the things for me coming to the group going, oh, you get that too. And I mean, I'd been in hospital twice with an expected appendicitis, and others in the group that had had their appendix removed when it was absolutely fine. And actually probably now I know that was an endometriosis flare up at that time. I've still got my appendix. But yeah, it is different for everybody. And I do think it is important for yourself to kind of track your symptoms, write them down, so that when you do go to a doctor that you feel like you've got all the information there to give them. But it is a concern, you know, Katie and Sarah have already talked about feeling gaslit, that you could go to a doctor with that and still feel quite dismissed, because it is just sometimes the luck of the draw of who you speak to on that day and what's their knowledge of endometriosis.
It's also not confined to the week or days of your period. I mean, you experience symptoms before, during and after, and they can range, you know, like from chronic fatigue, you know, just literally not feeling like you can get out of bed in the morning. It's not just pain, but, you know, back pain in your legs, headaches. It's a whole body condition. It doesn't just affect you during that time of your period, does it?
Well, fundamentally, it's an inflammatory disease. So often you hear people suffering with it, so it's like your body is on fire. And it falls into category with, I know there's lots of other inflammatory diseases, but it's the symptoms that you get are often all linked to that. So it gets diagnosed as IBS because of your gut is basically inflamed.
Fibromyalgia often gets, because of the lethargy and some of the other symptoms you get, like some other autoimmune diseases often get misdiagnosed with it, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, if it's even like, I know we've discussed before, there's small symptoms that you don't. I think what I found really frustrating for me was that I went to the doctors over all those years and with one thing and another thing and another thing, and you get treated like a hypochondriac, but really you would hope that the doctor would look at your records and link those dots for you, because all of them actually are due to inflammation or the endometriosis, even down to things like I've got the beginnings of gum disease. I know, Donna, we've discussed this. When I got diagnosed with endometriosis, all of a sudden, that makes sense, because, I brush my teeth, I floss, I was like perfect, like oral health. Yeah, exactly. And then like, there's no reason that your gums are bleeding, but it's actually a symptom. But I mean, I was at the doctors with, over the years, migraines. I get terrible night sweats. Like, I drench the bed. I have to change the bedding 3 times a night sometimes because it's just soaked through, and that's nightly. So then you're not sleeping properly. I get incontinence sometimes, like, because it was growing on my bladder nerves, or still is. Painful bowel movements before and after going to the toilet. So there's so many things that affect people.
If you look at the female body, we're actually quite badly designed. Everything is, all of those things that get affected are all, like, it's all so closely connected, isn't it? So, like, you can see why those areas, you know, that are irritated, like your bowel and your bladder and stuff like that. But you know, it's very, it can be difficult to join the dots when it's affecting your, you know, you've got a headache or it's your legs or other things. So you kind of, it's not until you get the diagnosis, is it really, that you start to
piece it together
and realise that actually this is all. But even now, I still get a moment where I go, oh my goodness, that is down to that. Because it was like, I always, for me, that big revelation was actually fairly recent when it came to why I was so tired at certain times of the month, actually. And then by keeping like a diary of there was a pattern, it was cyclical. It was actually, it was sort of so many days before my cycle was about to start. And I would just feel, I'd struggle to keep my eyes open, you know, through the working day. And I'm thinking, oh, God, this is awful. And I literally slapping myself around the face, trying not to fall asleep, just felt physically exhausted. But it's all connected.
I think for me as well, ovulation pain at times has been more painful than period pain. Obviously, that's more mid-cycle. But actually, again, that's not something that's, you know, you're not taught about that could be a painful experience. It's actually, can you even feel that's happening in your body? And it's like, yes, very much so. And then when you talk about, sort of 3 weeks or more out of the month where you're being affected by these symptoms. It's the impact on how do you work, how do you have a social life. It just affects everything, because you kind of make plans and think, well, I might not be able to do that because I might need to be in the bath, because that's the thing that helps me with pain relief, or just at home with a hot water bottle. And then I think that's the thing, if it's something that's starting to impact on your daily life, you know it's not normal.
Which that does kind of bring you around quite nicely, doesn't it, about how it impacts fertility, because it does impact on every aspect of your life, for sure. Like, so, your relationships, friendships, even, social interactions, things, going out, because how many times you might have to cancel an event or something because you're just really, not feeling up to it. Your sexual relationships, with your partners, how that, think of how that impacts them, but obviously, it does have an impact on everybody around you as well.
Well, I mean, a lot of women, like, intimacy can be completely off the cards because it's just, you're talking excruciatingly painful, just even using tampons.
Exactly.
And if you're feeling exhausted and mentally drained and you're just trying to get through the day doing what you have to do, that's not that's not a precursor for romantic times.
And I think a lot of women do experience pain or bleeding, pain during and after, but bleeding after, most definitely. So I think that's not uncommon.
What about the work aspect? Sort of, how have your employers been? Have they been understanding or supportive? Or
I feel I've been incredibly lucky with over the years with my employers, and certainly now they're very understanding. I mean, often during my supervisions I'm asked, how are you? Is there anything that we need to be doing or could be doing to help you? Most of the time it doesn't really impact on my work anymore, because I have a little bit more flexibility in the way that I'm kind of hybrid working. We can thank God I'm COVID for that. But I can work from home. I can do if I have to, or I'm not feeling great. It's not always having to commute and go into the office, but that's not the same for everybody.
No, and for me, I spoke with the occupational health at work, and my work have also been really good. But it's certainly not the case for everybody, and it depends on what kind of work it is that you do, and it does make you think, well, that's there's some careers or jobs that I think, well, I could never do that job now, knowing how that would impact my health.
I mean, I've been lucky, but my job's it's a corporate environment, and it's very male based, and I would say that, I mean, I've been lucky and everyone's been understanding with how my journey's gone, but I think really it's, again, and it's not blaming anyone, but nobody's heard of it, so they don't really know what it means, and it's not their fault, but they're not going to have the understanding of just how much it's affecting you and your ability to live. For me, actually, personally, I've been signed off for a long time now. I'll go into it as I go, but it's sort of, it was more to do, it's the side effects really. I was put onto a medication called Dynogest. Again, the thing is, it's so difficult, and I understand that even for the specialists in the area, because everybody's so individual and reacts so differently. So that's not to say that Dynogest, I mean, I understand that, from research I've now done, for a lot of women, it's actually a fantastic medication that really helps them. It's not a contraceptive, but it is a hormone, it's progesterone medication that slows down the growth of endometriosis and endometriomas. For a lot of people it really works. Unfortunately for me, it created like really bad mental health side effects, and I've now discovered that it's not particularly uncommon. It can happen to a lot of women who take that, and I think it's just another side of the awareness that sort of you want to get out there, and just so people have knowledge, because if they're armed with that, when they start taking it, if they start to have really bad mood changes, change of behaviour, mental health, I don't want to say problems, but that it could be down to that medication. I got to the point where I was suicidal, and I wouldn't be here without my family. They stopped me doing some awful things. I don't know where I'd be without them. But it really was that bad, and again, it's difficult because I don't want to criticise surgeons or doctors and people, but I did raise with my GP about the way I was feeling. But the GPs, they just, not necessarily their fault, but they just don't have the knowledge. None of my GPs that I saw had even heard of Dynagest. They didn't know what it was. So they couldn't turn around and say, oh, maybe that's why you're starting to feel this way. And even the surgeon that actually prescribed it was, again, knowing I'd had endometriosis and how he'd prescribed it, but he was quite dismissive of, oh, it's probably nothing, the fact that you've got anxiety like this is probably nothing to do with that. And you have to trust them, so you keep taking it. And for me, it was this group that really helped, because the first group that I went to, another lady had had a very similar experience of being on this medication, and it just really hit home. And I said, right, I elect to take myself off of it. And I'm not 100%. I've got a big hole to dig myself out of, but I've improved on that side of things a lot since. Like Donna met me that first day. I think I was in floods of tears. Like my mum came with me because I wasn't going to come because I wouldn't even leave the house. Yeah. I got dragged in there. I was in a wild state. Yeah, it's just raising awareness again. Some people it's really great for that medication, but I think it's hormones. And hormones, all of it.
Of course.
Yeah.
If the person that prescribed that to you isn't the person that's monitoring it day to day, they've done their bit. They've like we say, discharge you or put you under the care of your GP, who's got no idea of, because they're not the specialist in the room when it comes to that particular drug or that particular condition. They're just trying to figure out what it is. Yeah. And like Casey said, that's no criticism for them, but they're not the person that prescribed it in the first place. No. So I've been having GnRH analog, which I'm on Prostap injections, which induces menopause. So you can't stay on it long term. You're not supposed to, unless it's under supervision, because it affects your bone density, which for women over a certain age is really not great anyway. Yeah. So I was on it for 6 months, then I was off of it, and then I was on it again for another 6 months a year later. And then when I got referred for my surgery, they've put me on it again. So this time I'm on it indefinitely until the surgery comes through. But the difficulty with that is I experience menopause symptoms. So all my periods have stopped, although I still do get the pain often, and some of the other symptoms that are associated with having a period, even though I'm not getting them. And menopause side effects on top of that. But the waiting list is so long. I've now been on that for over a year, so that's problematic. And whilst they are overseeing it, I've not had I've been having those injections every 3 months, as I've been told to do. I've not had anybody checking in with me. I've not had a bone density scan or anything like that. So I'm just carrying on my merry way, just getting these injections. I've been on them for over a year, and there's been no checking to see how I'm getting on with those. They just continue to stab me in the arm every 3 months.
It's crazy, really. I think it's a point we've all raised at the group, that something we'd like to see is monitoring. And one of the nurses at the group, I think she was actually quite surprised that we don't get monitoring, because any other chronic disease, which this is, apparently, every 6 months or a year, there is. But it doesn't matter whether you're going back to our point earlier, it doesn't matter if you're NHS or private. You get the appointment if you're lucky, and that's it. Like Sarah says, they just literally send you on your merry way. There is no follow-up, even privately. People expect, but obviously if you want to pay for an appointment, that's your prerogative, but they don't suggest that you do. There's nothing, no checkups at all. I've recently had an appointment. I've had some MRI scans. It's shown that it's growing back. I've got endometriomas again. They've put me, after all the problems I've had with taking different hormones, they've put me back on the pill, and then said, "See ya," and that's it. There's nothing. And I think it would. I think what I'd like to see would be amazing. Would be at least once a year, blood tests, just to check in to see what your symptoms are doing, some kind of ultrasound or scan or something. I know this is like a dream world and funding is not there for everybody, like across the NHS, but just something along those lines
You have yearly checkups for asthma and diabetes. So why would endometriosis not be able to be a part of that?
It's a chronic condition.
It's a chronic condition. There's no cure. It's long term.
And you're often on medication or some sort of medication. Okay, albeit in a contraceptive, but that still needs monitoring. We still need to know how your body's responding.
It still has side effects.
You just put any, like, you know,
you're just going in blindly, trusting.
Well, any of these medications, like the injections, even just a pill, the Dynagest I was on, unless I'd come to this group and then elected to take myself off of it, I'd have just been left on that indefinitely. And I don't think you even should be, because I think that it's hormones, it can cause osteoporosis and fertility problems. And I mean, we haven't even really touched on the fertility, because
that's huge, isn't it?
I mean, that's something I find frustrating, because I think it is true. Like you said, you told a fib and said you were starting a family. I've not been in a position yet where I've wanted or been able to start a family, but that's not to say I'd never considered it or would hope still. But when you're honest and you say, "Oh, are you trying for a baby?" and you say no, you do feel like you just drop down the list of priority, because. But what is so frustrating is you shouldn't, because if they caught it when you were 20, it could really impact how fertile you are by the time you get to 35, 40, because if they don't do anything, it just develops, and then, oh, whoops, it's too late, it's grown everywhere. You might have had a better chance if we'd called it earlier.
You obviously, you've joined the support group, and you've all said how helpful that has been for you. What other avenues have you been down to try and find support? I know, Katie, you said about doing research online and that sort of thing, but where is your trusted information from? Because obviously even though it's a condition that hasn't unfortunately had much research or sort of looking into, there is also a lot of information out there as well. I was talking to someone the other day who said that they're following someone on Instagram who's doing like a diet which helps to lower inflammation, and she's like, I'm going to try that because hopefully that will help me. But obviously all of that needs to be taken very carefully as well, because you don't always know where that information is coming from. So where do you get your support and your sort of trusted info from, apart from the group?
It's difficult to say, really. I mean, there's lots of books, as you say, there's lots of people on Instagram and and Facebook, and there's forums. And again, what I would say is, what I see people saying works for one person, it's something different that works for another. So, for me, I actually, before I even knew I had endometriosis, I knew that when I ate meat, it had an impact on me. So I had cut out meat, and I'd also cut out alcohol, because I knew that was making my symptoms worse. But for other people, it might be dairy, it might be caffeine, whereas that's something that doesn't seem to have an impact on me. So there's a lot of trial and error and seeing what works for your body. So it's really hard to say where's the trusted information, because what might genuinely be really working for one person might not be the thing that your body needs. But certainly I did, again, and it's privately, see a dietitian to kind of get their take on things and kind of any supplements that might be helpful. But again, you've got to be careful with those. If you're taking any other medications, that you're always meant to speak to a doctor and check these things out. So it's really difficult to say what's your trusted source. I would say I've got a trial and error for my own body. But
I'd completely agree with that, Donna. And it's taken me a long time to sort of get into that mindset, because I think it's a natural human thing that once you get diagnosed, you then want the cure. And you read so many different things. One lady might say, oh, I did this and it made this massive difference to me and I feel almost cured. And I'd go into that and think, right, I'm doing that. And I'd give it my all, like whether that was a diet or a supplement. And then when it had no impact, it's just this emotional roller coaster, because I'd get really down, oh, it hasn't worked for me. But I've sort of come to the acceptance that exactly what you just said is trial and error. It's so individual. And I know that doesn't sound helpful, but I think for me, it's read the forums, talk to as many other people with the condition, and then take all of the ideas or positive suggestions they have and try them. But don't beat yourself up or get upset if they don't work for you, because you'll find some that do. And if it doesn't, I mean, like for me, I was vegetarian for years and I've just introduced meat again. That's because for me, as upsetting as it is, and I'm all organic and free range and trying to still be nice to the animals, but I actually digest it quite well. I find that I don't flare on it. It's something that works for me. And as part of the diet, I can get the nutrients that maybe I was lacking from that. So it is so individual. You just have to keep going.
Yeah. We've also got some of the sort of well-known sites like the Endometriosis UK charity, which has got doing a lot of research and support going on, and they're sort of doing a lot of advocating for sufferers as well. You know, so if you were worried about sort of whether your sources were legitimate or not, and the advice they were giving was sound, then obviously you've got those trusted, resources. Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I follow sort of support groups on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. But I find they ask more questions than we do give answers, unfortunately, because they're always struggling. You know, it's lots of people sort of going on there who are sort of really looking for help and support themselves, and saying, like, I've just had this is a letter, or I've been told that this is happening, or I'm getting this symptom. Do you get that? Does anybody else
It can
get
bring
this?
you down, can't it?
A bit like, I don't have the answers. You almost need to have like a professional on board that can answer their questions, because otherwise you've got lots of, it's a bit like the blind leading the blind, because you're all coming back with your own experiences, and you might get one person that's got the same as you. So I'm not sure they're always that helpful, and a couple of times I have had to come off of those because you get a lot of people on their soapbox about certain things, and I don't always find that particularly helpful for me. Whilst it might be great for them to vent or their frustrations out, and I do get it because it is frustrating a lot of the time. Sometimes the negativity I find, getting into that mindset is actually, you end up on a slippery path,
I totally agree, and sometimes it just brings you down more, and you can end up just thinking they just don't have any answers and everybody's just saying the same thing. But I think when I'm in a more positive mindset, it's getting ideas or information from other women that have been through it already. Like it could be just one person say, like for me it was about that medication, and then not necessarily blindly following it, but it arms you with a little bit of information that you can take to your GP and maybe quiz them about, oh, could this help, or what is this medication, or can I have this? I've also paid to see a nutritional therapist because I think diet is a big one. That would be my main thing to anybody suffering. Just, it's not going to cure you. It's not going to be 100%, but take a look at your diet. Don't go near processed food. I think that's just generally for health, but it does seem to help. And then obviously alcohol, anything inflammatory. Then it becomes really personal about trying to work out what your triggers are.
And I think other sort of holistic therapies that different people have talked about that help, be it massage, acupuncture, fascial release, like a whole host of different things really.
And none of those things, they can't hurt you, It's not, we're not advocating for you to go out and take some, revolutionary drug.
No. If a massage gives you relief and makes you feel better mentally, not just physically, then that's a positive thing to do, is as you say.
And I think those things have been found to help some people with inflammatory conditions. So
it's just taking those ideas, I think, and then even things like the nutritional therapist has said to me, where I obviously reacted to the Dynagest in a certain way because I was like progesterone sensitive. I'm now on the progesterone only pill, which is slightly different, but it's all synthetic. But nobody's ever spoken to me about biologically identical progesterone that they can give you. It's not, well, no one's ever, apart from my nutritional therapist, mentioned that. So it's something that's now in my back pocket that I think, okay, well, if at some point things aren't working for me, I can at least ask my GP about. It might not be appropriate. They might give me reasons why it's not right. But the frustrating thing I find is a lot of the time you have to find this information yourself and go and ask your GP rather than the GPs being forthcoming in diagnosing your symptoms, or even once they know you've got it, suggesting things that might help, you have to advocate, and
I
that's
think
difficult.
what they fail to do as well is to look at the whole person.
Yes.
So to look at their medical history. So things like, you know, if you had suffered from any mental health conditions in the past, or, you know, periods of depression or anxiety, don't prescribe Dynagest to those people, because they're probably going to be more
susceptible
disposed to that. You know, it goes without saying with any medication that there are some things that if you're on other medication or you've got other things going alongside, that this could then have an impact on it. They don't think they always do that. I don't think they look at your records and say, right, well, this person is on this antidepressant and they're on this because they've got a heart condition and they've got, and then, well, if we give them that, what's we throw that into the mix, how's that going to affect them? I don't think they look at that big picture, and they look at the person as a whole. So they're not looking at what's right, they're just saying, right, well, this is what we give you for this, so we're just going to give you that. They're looking at that, one thing as that one size fits all approach, rather than looking at it as an individual approach, which doesn't work. They've got to look at that bigger picture. It's not just saying, like, you've got endometriosis and this is what we give people with endometriosis. We've got to say what else is going on for this person, you know.
And very sadly, we are the one connecting those dots and pointing those things out, and it is hard work, and it takes a lot of like research to try and, you know, make sense of that, and also having people around you that understand and are supportive of that. And that is not something that everybody's got. Not everybody's got the time to look all these things up. Some people might not have the money to speak to like a nutritional therapist, and we appreciate that when we're talking about it, that it's been really helpful for us, but that just isn't the way for a lot of people. And a lot of people are just therefore relying on those odd medical appointments that happen every now and then. They're not even regular, monitored, reviewed, and that is really hard. You know, we have really had to advocate for ourselves, and that is not easy for all people to do. And I think as well, having someone with you at appointments, even if you are a good advocate, is really important, because some of the things that we've been told by doctors are quite shocking, and having someone else there to hear what you've been told, and
it's
as well,
really emotional, so having that a second pair of ears,
and sometimes just for digesting the information and making sure you're getting across all the points that you want to the doctor or consultant, it's really helpful to have someone with you. So that's something I would really recommend.
Things before you go to the appointment, questions that you might ask, because in the moment you often forget, don't you, all of those key things. And medical professionals do have a real tendency to bamboozle you with medical terms and acronyms that you've got no idea, and not just be afraid to say, sorry, what does that mean? You know, I've waited 18 months for a 10-minute appointment. I deserve for that consultant to have read about me and to know a little bit about me before you go in and you tell me what you're going to do. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that is the least we deserve.
But you're absolutely right about looking at the whole as well, and it just goes back to where we were talking about symptoms at the start. And personally for me, I just look back and I think I've always suffered with like depression, anxiety. That's my nature. So I was on citalopram, which is an antidepressant, from my early 20s, only a very small dosage, and it sort of worked for me. But then by the time that I was going back, feeling like a hypochondriac, because they were doing all tests on me but couldn't find anything wrong with me when I talked about the migraines and night sweats. But I collapsed at work. I had to call out paramedics, and the doctor told me it was IBS because of my stress and anxiety. I should eat better and exercise more, and I was absolute gym fiend like before all this happened. I was very conscious of my diet. Then I started experiencing, and I still do, it's just daily chronic pain for me. I mean, we all suffer with that, but for mine it's very much in my lower back and then down the sciatic pathway. It goes right down my leg into my foot. I was sent to orthopaedic surgeons, neurologists, neurosurgeons, all sorts of people, and I've had so many tests. There's nothing wrong with my back. There's nothing wrong with my hips or my nerves. Well, I think my nervous system, they now think, is inflamed and in chronic pain because of the endometriosis, because it's all on my left side. But all the while I was going through these appointments, the doctor said to me, if you were my usual patient, I'd send you to a psychiatrist. And I know that's not an unusual thing for the doctors to be saying to patients, but I mean, I came out of there in absolute tears. And I maintain that unfortunately they see that you're perhaps on citalopram or that you have depression and anxiety, so that it's an easy thing for them to suggest, to just say, oh, it's in your head. But it's so damaging. But if they'd looked at all my records as a whole, they would have seen all these other symptoms, or they should have, in my opinion, and sort of gone, oh, okay, and you've come to us because 3 out of the 4 weeks of a month you can't function because of your periods. Maybe there's something else we need to be, like, they should have asked those extra questions. Unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. I don't know. They don't have enough time. It's not. I mean, I know it's difficult. They're not given the time, the resource to do that.
But they're using a lot of resources on giving us unnecessary tests.
That's true.
And doing unnecessary surgeries, potentially, like laparoscopies, just to look and see and not actually do anything.
Just doesn't economically make sense.
It doesn't make sense financially, in my opinion.
So what would be your magic wand if there was one thing that you could change about the system or public perception or education?
I think we've got enough time.
That's why I said one thing.
I think early intervention, but then that kind of does encapsulate a whole lot of things. So that does involve developing professional understanding of the condition and what that means, what that looks like. But getting in early, taking young women seriously when they come into GP surgeries and, with those first sort of initial signs, because you're playing with their futures, really, aren't you, just by dismissing them off bat. So educating doctors, health practitioners, but also getting in with young people, boys as well. Because they are somebody's son and they are somebody's brother, and hopefully someday they may be somebody's boyfriend or husband.
Or somebody's GP.
Or somebody's GP, quite. So we do need to get that in there. And I think just generally early, forget the stigma, the embarrassment and all of the, get that out of the system, giggle, do whatever, but then let's get down to this, because this is what people's lives look like. And this is what's going to happen if you don't do that. So education. That's for me. My magic wand.
Mine would be for GPs to look at the whole person, because I think then that doesn't just help us with endometriosis; it helps everybody with so many things. And just being heard and listened to is sometimes half the thing that you need. So for me, that would be.
I totally agree with that. If one person listens to this podcast and hears one thing that rings a bell or hits home with them, and they think, oh, because it's just, again, looking at the history of a patient. I mean, they don't know what causes endometriosis, but there are theories. And I would say I've met a lot of women who it does seem to run in their family. Like, there's a strong possibility that genetics play a part. So if your mum or your sister has it, then again, I think that's something where you should be questioning the GP if you're having symptoms. Another theory that I've heard is, and I've spoken to other women as well who've experienced, if you've had like major surgery in that area, sometimes it sort of triggers the mutation of those cells, and other symptoms start after that. So a lot of people who've had C-sections never had symptoms beforehand, but then they start after. And for me personally, I mean, it was different. I had a cyst on one of my ovaries when I was 12 that wasn't endometriosis related, but I had to have removed through major surgery. And that was around the time I started my periods, and I've suffered ever since. So it's just having, again, it's both of what these two ladies have said already, education and GPs looking at everybody as a whole, because if you have that sort of knowledge and you know those things, you be arming yourself with knowledge and becoming aware of it might just help you get to that diagnosis quicker.
We like to end our podcast. What would be the title of your life story?
Not all in my head is basically where I was going with it, but
listen to me, please.
No, I was going to say that. It's more than just a bad period.
Yeah, that's yes.
Is that not already?
Yeah, that'll do.
I think that might be a podcast.
Is it? Oh, really?
No, I feel like I've heard it before.
It feels like it should, and it also means that
if men had periods, we wouldn't be here.
Well. Yeah, if it's more that kind of reflects on the stage of your life, because it's not just a period of life, is it? It's not just a bad period you go with. It's kind of like a permanent, kind of ongoing thing. that you're kind of having to navigate. So it kind of falls into a couple of
I'll go with that.
categories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's not just a bad period.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I really appreciate you coming and chatting. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really informative and yeah, really powerful. So as you say, if one person listens to this and it makes a difference, then you know our job is not done, because never done, but hopefully it will help. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.